Greetings, everyone. I am today going to discuss the Michael Bay Transformers films. This is you've probably heard of them. They were big blockbusters, and they were very polarizing. Some people loved them, some people hated them. Opinions changed as the series went on. The Nostalgia Critic, very notably, just insisted these movies were great at the beginning, despite their flaws, and by number 4 was just kind of blah about them. So let's come into these movies. So Transformers is a chunk of my childhood. I was just recently talking with a friend about how, I am a fan of Transformers. I'm not a modern fan of Transformers, in that, in general, I'm not following any new cartoons that are coming out. In general, I'm not reading anything on fan blogs or anything about Transformers, but I was a fan of G1 and the Beast Wars, Beast Machines continuity. And so that was my experience with Transformers in general. I'm coming into the Michael Bay films. Now, we're going to do them one by one, and we're going to start with the first film. I highly enjoyed the first film. It was, there were some moments, one of the problems with the Transformers films is obviously, as much as they're targeting the nostalgia market, they're also very much targeting the younger generation, and it shows, at least with this first one, because there's just some moments that are very that are just overall kind of ridiculous concepts. The Transformers struggling to hide themselves around the house and just causing, hitting the power lines, tearing up the ground, crushing the flower beds. This idea that they're big creatures and therefore they're clumsy. Honestly, if a real robot was that clumsy, it wouldn't be getting very far. I would expect a robot to have a far better spatial awareness than was shown. I found it really ridiculous. The lubricating the human joke. Toilet humor, completely ridiculous. It's very clear what they're doing, and makes no sense from any sort of standpoint. If the Transformer has oil in it, popping its oil cap and leaking all its oil when he's not getting another infusion of oil. Sorry, overthinking this. In overall, there were some moments in these films that were very, very childish. Then you have the Shia LaBeouf moments. I don't know how his name's spelled. His name's pronounced. That's how I pronounce it. Shia LaBeouf. He is just, he's got this standard approach to how he reacts to situations. He's very well known for it. He is amazing at seeming completely flustered by any situation he's put at, and makes you believe this is Joe Schmo that is suddenly dealing with robots. Just not an ounce of cool in him, Joe Schmo. And so, in that respect, he worked really well as the initial audience surrogate in the film. But as it went on, I do not know if Shia LaBeouf actually was able to properly give weight to a character who this kind of thing is now second nature to him. So let's take on the first film for a second. The plot, Michael Bay's movies are, kind of. Someone used this phrase recently, and I'm gonna steal it from them. It's kind of a plot. It's not. There aren't plot holes. It's a plot canyon that occasionally has stepping stones. And that isn't, even the first movie doesn't have a problem with that. I've read some fan fiction that solves some of the more egregious problems, like the fact that somehow every time the cube creates a robot, it is a homicidal maniac right from the get-go. That seems to be the default setting the cube is generating. But overall, there are a lot of problems plot-wise. But if you're willing to shut your brain off and just kind of, it's a Michael Bay action film. If you're willing to take it as a Michael Bay action film, it does pretty well. The action is great. It was great to see some of these robots on, on the big screen. You really believe that they're there, what they're doing, and the first one is lacking many flaws that future robots had, so you really feel that it works. The one problem being Starscream's the first film tends to have this, makes nods to the fact that Starscream is a backstabbing bastard, but you don't ever get to see it. So when Megatron starts yelling at Starscream, you don't quite understand why if you're not a fan. And overall, I think that's the flaw this first movie comes with, is that a lot of it is just an appeal to the fans, and the rest of it is cookie cutter Michael Bay. Blow shit up, and there's not a lot of depth to the film. You move on to the second one. And in the second one, you're dealing with, you start to deal with the issues that exist when you're dealing with someone who now kind of considers living in a big budget action flick to be normal. This is the one that's honestly least memorable to me. If I'm right, this is the one that has the really horrible racial stereotype robots that were just so wrong, and how Michael Bay ever thought that was an acceptable thing to put in a movie in the post the year 2000 will forever be a mystery to me. But it's a that movie, it does kind of spark some good. It starts to give a little more depth to the characters that aren't robots. It adds to the history and really makes this history seem to come alive. It does start a really strange trend where apparently everything of note that happened in the Cybertronian War happened on Earth, and yet no one seemed to know prior to the movie that this planet existed prior to the first movie. And this kind of starts that. This sets that trend, in that once again we're dealing with an ancient Cybertronian artifact. So you're playing on number. So this one got a lot worse in the plot department as far as plot holes go. It was just in general bad. And it just keeps getting worse from here on. It's, for instance, some of the Constructicons can be seen in, while Devastator is destroying the pyramid, on the side are the Constructicons. And they can be seen in several scenes like that. And it's poorly cut together. But it does give a feeling, a real feeling that despite this, it was still a somewhat enjoyable movie. It was the most forgettable of the four. I think I've only watched it once, and it really progressed very little, aside from adding a little bit of depth to Shia LaBeouf's character. You move on to number 3, and this is where things get a little strange, because once again we're dealing with a Cybertronian artifact that was left on Earth. And this is where Rowling starts to get curious about this idea that somehow Earth is the center of the Cybertronian War. I love the addition of Leonard Nimoy as Sentinel Prime. I love the byplay that happened with the whole film. Optimus playing the idea that he never feels that he's enough of a leader, that there would be better leaders. He's the leader they have, not the leader they deserve. It's really a third film was actually a step up. Giving a kind of an interchangeable character. Michaela went out, and there's a new girlfriend character, and we're not giving much introduction to this idea. We're not given real reason to fear for her. And then additionally, she spends most of the film being pretty strong. But the idea that really the win comes from her, who's been passive in the entire middle third of the film, suddenly becoming a very strong character again, and talking down Megatron of all people, it kind of came out of left field for me. I liked this third film finalized what we were seeing in the first two, which is the idea that the military, rather than running and hiding from these robots, has trained and trained and trained and learned to deal with giant robots. That's actually a very... I really appreciated that this development of the military's posture, where it goes from we can't do anything about this to, you know, we have big robots are actually really impractical, and so the idea that humans would be defenseless against them is somewhat ridiculous. It's just a matter of applying some ingenuity, and the movie really showed that. And so it was a really fun. It was really fun to see that development. I also need to stop to cut outside of and break my tendency to not try to talk about plot holes. To talk about the absolutely ridiculous discussion on the functioning of the space bridge. So, granted, it says it breaks the laws of physics. It says it right in the movie, so you can't expect strong physics when going at this film. However, despite the idea that you can't, it breaks physics, they needed to distribute control rods all over the planet, or not control rods, but reaction rods all over the planet. And when I heard all of this, I thought, okay, Cybertron is this shell that they're going to transport around the Earth, and then use the Earth as we're going to use the Earth as the core as humans rebuild Cybertron. This is a very, very this was a reasonable thought to me. Cybertron probably wasn't a entirely 100% to its core machine world. I can accept that. At one point it had to have an organic core, and the idea that they're just taking the outer shell that is Cybertron and porting it around a new resource factory is something I totally buy into. What I don't buy into is the idea that they had to place reaction rods all around the world, and Cybertron is appearing outside, to the side of the planet. And the scale that Cybertron was appearing at, one, you wouldn't need rods all around the world. You just need rods where the energy is being projected. Two, this Cybertron to the side of the world, once the space bridge finished, assuming the space bridge even could provide the correct speed and momentum, the correct momentum to this new planet, that it would have stayed in orbit with the Earth would immediately have crushed into it. There is no way something that size doesn't have a gravitational pull that would just suck us in. Earth was destroyed. No matter what, the way they positioned it really wouldn't have worked. Really sucked me out of the film. I couldn't stand it. But up until that point, it was somewhat entertaining. I also have a problem with the human form Decepticon, the Decepticon that was undistinguishable from human. Why aren't all... If they had the technology to build and create that, where did they get the spark for it? Didn't the All-Spark get destroyed 2 movies ago? I don't know, there's so many problems with it. Then came Transformers: Age of Extinction. I came into this one with less enthusiasm than I did with the last 3. Transformers: Age of Extinction, the movies had gotten steadily more ridiculous. I wasn't sure I'd want them. But it actually, it ditched Shia LaBeouf, who'd, forgot to mention in my Transformers 3 review. He was a big, he was making less and less sense as a character just because he was developing as a character, but I really don't think Shia LaBeouf was able to really deliver a character who wasn't just completely out of his depth. He tried valiantly, I'll give him that. It was a decent attempt, but I don't think the character I was sold as the character as a hardened, combat tested, ready to go in guns blazing character. Didn't buy it. So we kind of come into 4 where they've ditched the human cast of characters, and we've moved a bunch of years in the future, and now the Autobots are being hunted down. Public opinion has turned against them after the actions of the Decepticons in the 3rd movie. Honestly, with the way our government works and the way public opinion works, I totally buy that. It's a I'm generally sold on the family that we see. I get somewhat invested with them. I like the fact that they bring in a lot of, hints at a deeper backstory, that there is a creator behind. There was a creator behind the Autobots and Decepticons. Nice harkening back to the concepts in G1 continuity. And I enjoy the fact that he's the hints that there's something greater going on, that we're going to have a creator who they really open up the idea of the series, leave some continuity to be explored. Overall, I'm kind of confused as to how humans immediately got a incredibly futuristic looking transformation sequence out of the material when the best, what the creators could do was this very mechanical looking process. Maybe it was an aesthetic, who knows, maybe the Autobots and Decepticons came out of the Transformers, the creators' version of skeuomorphism. This idea that, should look like an old school So maybe they had their own skeuomorphism phase that led to the Autobots and Decepticons all their coding, making them react as though they were actually mechanically transforming, instead of it being some special property, some special programmable metal that manipulated as the programming design designates. It was an interesting concept. I haven't mentioned this, but like at the beginning of the first Transformers movie, Ratchet supposedly, or whatever his name was in the first film, whatever the medic's name was, I think it was Ratchet. He fixed the voice box of Bumblebee, and we continue to be harassed with this trying to understand this strange radio speech that he's still doing despite his voice box getting fixed. And I'm just like, come on. It was hard enough to understand in the first film. It didn't get any better. His jealousy, though, was kind of funny. They really got into the way humans will justify horrors, and justify their actions, and that was a little deep, and I'm surprised it got that deep. The idea that okay, I do, and I find the fact that the humans were stupid enough to believe that when they kept having this error where they got Megatron instead of Optimus Prime, that it was just some coder's error and not a more fundamental flaw. Unfortunately, we've seen really bad security practices in the last few years. People having things connected to the net that have no reason to be connected to the net. And therefore, you know what? Yeah, I can see that happening at the right type of company. And then we get to the fights in China. Specifically, it was great, worked well. I especially liked the appearance of the Dinobots. The Dinobots were my favorite, and for them to have shown up in some form, it was a little twinkle in my heart. Just the idea that these are big bad robots, and compared to other robots, they are the bigger and badder robots. It's exactly what they should be. They were more action than word, and so I think they were portrayed just excellently. Overall, I enjoyed it. I believe the fourth, though, ended with Optimus taking off and apparently achieving orbital flight, reaching orbit on main thrusters alone, and makes me just question, why did they need a spaceship back in the third film? Why? There were just so many plot holes, as I said. It's a plot valley. It's more hole than ground to walk on. So, overall, they're good movies. If they make another one, I'm going to go watch it. Why? Because as much as they're all cookie-cutter Bay films. The fourth one gave me hope that there's actually something, that they might actually be thinking a little deeper with it. And maybe we can see something, maybe we'll see something good out of it. I probably won't see it anymore in the theaters, though, because in general, theater's not worth it. But yeah, good films. Overall, if you're not a fan of Michael Bay action blockbusters, you're not going to be a fan of these films. Plain and simple. If you go in expecting a film that is substantial, you're going to be disappointed. If you're expecting a film that's going to appeal to an adult, you'll get it to a degree, but for the most part, not really. They're as much as they're adult films, their target audience is in the teenager to adult crowd. Their subject matter kind of runs that way, but there still remain just small jokes that are really not targeted at an adult audience. So, again, recommend, but only if you're willing to sit through a Michael Bay action flick. See ya.